Hi, this is Liz, and welcome to my podcast, Spiritually Speaking with Liz. Today, I've got a fab guest. Well, I don't do other than fab guests, do I? But today's you're really going to enjoy. We're joined by Jo Hutton. So, Jo is a yoga teacher and she qualified in around 2011, practicing yoga before that, of course. And then she opened her own place called Happy Yoga Newcastle. And she is also a senior yoga teacher for the Yoga Alliance Professionals. And she was awarded that in 2019. So, Jo, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello.
It's great to have you on. And so I always like to know people's backstories before we
Mhm.
start. So, how did you get into yoga? How did yoga come into your life?
Well, I was a bit of a reluctant yogi, to be honest. I didn't, yoga came to me it was kind of forced upon me at university. So I went to the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama in Glasgow, and they were really holistic in their approach to drama. They were like, if you're going to work in the arts, you need to look after yourself. You need to look after your body, you need to look after your mind, otherwise you're going to burn out and you're not going to be able to work in the arts. And so they forced us to do an hour of Iyengar yoga every day. And I absolutely hated it. When I first started, I just couldn't. It was, we're talking 2008, 2009, and yoga was very different back then. And it was the teacher was amazing. She was absolutely wonderful. She was a very senior Iyengar teacher, love her to pieces. But she just, it was, I was 19 and I wanted to do drama. I didn't want to be doing these really slow poses with this woman in a leotard. And can you remember when people used to use the little symbols? You
Yeah, yeah,
should
yeah.
have the
Yeah.
symbols, and it was just too slow. It was too quiet, and I just did not get it at all. And then in my first year, I had a bereavement, and I was far away from my family, and I needed something for myself. So I joined a women's gym in Glasgow city centre, and they had something called body balance, the Les Mills body balance class, and I just loved that. I just It was exactly what I needed at that point in my life. Like I was able to move, I was able to, like, they weren't restrictive about you having to sit in silence, and I just loved it. And through that, I was able to join the dots to the Iyengar yoga. So it was kind of like a bridge from the body balance. That was like my gateway drug. And then I was able to spend longer in the Iyengar yoga. And then it was a 4-year course. So by the end of the 4 years, having done an hour every day, really getting into it, I loved it at the end. I was just an absolute convert, and I graduated feeling like I never wanted to set foot in a theatre ever again. I didn't like I didn't like the late nights. I didn't like the smoozing, but I loved yoga. And I just knew that I needed to go deeper with the yoga. And I felt like if I could get into yoga and if yoga could help me, then it could help anyone. And I wanted to find other people who might not be natural yogis and show them that, there is a way you can modify it to what you need at that time. And that's what I've done.
I think I love the reluctant yogi. That made me giggle. But I think that's really good because a lot of people they get into yoga and they're very focused on it and this is it and it's go 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 and it becomes an obsession with a lot.
Mhm.
And I think the fact that you didn't like it to start or that you were very reluctant is probably what, because I think you're looking at your website, and I know you have actual physical classes, but you have Zoom classes as well. But you sort of encompass everybody. You
Mm.
don't seem to say, oh, well, I'm just for, not that anybody does say I'm just for this style, but you can tell looking at it that, oh, okay, that's for the bendy Wendy's, or,
Mhm.
that's for this kind of thing, where you really have that serve everybody type of.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's because I just where I live, we got yoga so much later than other parts of the country. I live in the northeast of England, and we're always 10 years behind everyone else. So I feel like for a lot of my time building up my classes, I was actually explaining to people a lot what yoga was. Like now everybody knows what yoga is.
Oh,
And so I spent a lot of my early days like explaining what yoga was. So I really had to think, what is it? What is the purpose of this? Um, and I was a lot of my clients are people who probably wouldn't identify themselves as being spiritual or being yogic, but I just think that that's actually a human drive. And I think that there isn't spiritual people and yogi people. There's just people, and that's um, and if we can find a way to explain it, most people are quite interested in it because most people are interested in that kind of thing.
yeah, that's really true. Very true. What would you say your style of yoga is?
So, like I said, I started with Iyengar. So I got really into alignment and Iyengar, and then when I trained. It was actually a pre and postnatal. It doesn't actually exist in the same format anymore, but um, it was a pre and postnatal 200-hour course. So it was all focused on women's health. And then, and in my own personal practice at the time, I was really into Ashtanga.
Mhm.
Um, and then I absolutely, I don't know, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Mildly.
Buggered. Am I allowed to say buggered?
You've said it now.
I buggered me hip with all of the repetitive movements. I think I've got a dispensation towards hypermobility in my hips anyway. And at the time, I was getting pain in my hip, and I was going to my yoga teachers, and they were saying it was blocked energy and that I just needed to keep doing the yoga and keep doing the yoga. Like yoga has changed a lot in the 10. I think we're a lot more sensitive to like movement science and like which is great, but at that time it was very, the cure was always more yoga.
Mhm.
So I was doing more yoga and doing more yoga, and eventually I went to a physiotherapist, and they were like, you have absolutely, like, you need to stop. Whatever it is you're doing right now, you need to stop. So I had to learn how to, because I couldn't give up the yoga,
Mhm.
because as we know, yoga is not just the asana, is it? It's the whole thing. So I couldn't give it all up, but I had to modify it so that I was building strength and I was building stability. And at the same time as that was going on, as I was teaching the general classes, not the pre and postnatal classes, I was aware that actually, even if you're not teaching pre and postnatal yoga, there's a lot of, if you've got 20 people in the class, half of them will have probably gone through childbirth and will have, the issues that with pelvic floors, the issues with hip stability, all of those things are actually relevant to the general population, including men as well. Like pelvic floor health is really important for men. And so over time, it's kind of evolved into like a hybrid of lots of different styles. Technically, I would say it was hatha yoga, but I focus on core strength and stability, hip stability, and I focus on becoming connected to your body. So I think a lot of people in the world that we live in are so disconnected to their bodies, and the only relationship they have with it when it comes to exercise is like this really draconian, like you must push yourself. And actually, we a lot of people have lost the ability to have a conversation with their body and find out what their body needs.
Yeah.
So before, what I find with the general population is before you can start building up, you have to kind of come back to neutral and strip away and get people to learn to trust their bodies and get their bodies to trust them as well. Because I think a lot of people's bodies have got to the point where they're saying, well, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to be very protective. And you get a lot of tightness, you get a lot of you know, issues that are the body not being able to relax because that relationship between the mind and the body has become so fragmented. So I focus on the core strength, but then also the relationship with the body as well. So I think a lot of people who come to my classes are surprised. It's quite slow, but it's slow with a purpose. Um, and actually, that's hard as well, to get people to say, just because I'm not working in inverted commas hard doesn't mean it's not effective. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that. It's a mishmash of all the different styles.
But I think that's where we all become a
Yeah.
mismatch of what our personal story. So mine became, I did all the hatha, and I would, yeah, still call it that, but mine was all about the back, the core,
Mhm.
about our core strength. And exactly what you're saying, people are so disconnected from their body. You know, they're force feeding it, they're force
Mhm.
exercising it, they're not listening. And exactly like you say, you get them on a mat, you get them moving slowly, purposefully, and it's almost like, oh, when's this going to end? Or,
Mhm.
oh, when's it? But that is far more powerful, or can be far more powerful than a 10-mile run,
Yeah.
because it's total focus in you, in your body.
Mhm. I completely agree. And part of I see part of my job as like, not convincing, because I don't want to feel like the Pied Piper, but like highlighting how important that how important letting go of effort is, because it doesn't even necessarily need to be slow. I think a lot of it is slow, but it doesn't need to be slow. It's I think people come to yoga with the same attitude that we have off the mat, which is that the more effort you put into something, then the more you're going to get out of it. And actually, sometimes with yoga, it's the opposite. And it's very difficult to teach people how to just not try as hard, um, and to just let themselves like have a bit of fun, enjoy themselves as well. And um, when you see that shift in a student, you can really see that that's going to transform everything in their lives.
Yeah.
Like if they can apply that to, like, it is the most transformational thing that you can possibly have. But it seems almost too simple when people first come to it. They're like, oh, this is easy and simple, and you're like, oh no, this is hard. This is a life's work. Being able to stop and enjoy yourself is like, that's a life's practice right there.
It really is, and it's what we're all striving to be, isn't it? That presence and that awareness of ourselves and our bodies. So let me ask you this: so shift
Mhm.
of gears. How do you balance the, we'll call yoga the spiritual side,
Yeah.
the spiritual side of you and the business side of you? How do you merge those two together? Because you've done really well with your business. It's really successful. You're a full-time yoga teacher. You're not just, not that there's anything wrong with that, but you're not just doing a couple of classes a week on an evening. This is your
Mhm.
full-time job, and it has become very successful for you. There's always that misconception, I think, of yogis shouldn't have money. Spiritual
Mm.
people don't need money. Spiritual people have a gift, they should share it with other people for free, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of aspects to it I've just thrown at you. But how do you balance spirituality and business?
Well, I'm not sure I do balance it. I think, I think, I think that it's. I'm quite lucky because I find the business side fun. So I've always enjoyed the business side. I find it fun. Um, and I do have, I think, a big shift that happened in the way that I think about it was the reframing of marketing as instead of it being trying to sell your wares, but as communicating how you can help people.
Yeah.
And I now really do see marketing in that way. So I don't see selling my stuff as like, oh, I'm making money. I see it as this is what needs to happen for me to be able to help those people. And if I don't do it, then I can't help them. And I think it helps to structure your business so that you're able to say, well, this is how I help people for free, and this is how I make the money to live. So I have, free things on Instagram. I've got YouTube. I'm on a board of a charity that does donation-based yoga and does donation-based counseling, donation-based mindfulness, and that's how I help. But I'm only able to do that because I've built the business side so that can support, like, once you've got your mortgage paid and once you've got your bills paid, then you have the freedom to really think, right, well, how can I help people? Whereas if you go in thinking, I need to do this all for free, it's bad for me to make money, then you aren't ever going to be able to share your gifts because you're never going to get to the point where you can spend time helping people, because you're going to have to get another job, or you're going to have to um and that's fine. Like, I also run a teacher training school, so I help a lot of like newbie teachers, and one of the things that I always say to them is like, before you like decide what you want to do, really think what you want out of life, because a successful yoga teacher can absolutely be someone who has a full-time job and also teaches yoga on the side. It's just that's not how my business looked at from the beginning, because I did it straight out of university. So I didn't have another job to, like, I've never had another job. I've always done this. So it was either make money with this or don't make any money and live in a bin.
Wouldn't quite advise that. But there is so much, not maybe not as much about yoga,
Mm,
although you still see it, that yoga teachers, this is an observation, this isn't a
mhm,
criticism of anybody, but yoga teachers feel pushed to do a course of sessions, either 6 sessions, 10 sessions, whatever that comes to, and offer free ones in, because it's sort of been, it was back in the day, but
mhm,
people are sort of pushed to that, and I think that's wrong, because
mm,
you have, like, we have done all our training, we've spent years doing it, we've spent years before, being reluctant or not,
mhm.
coming into it, and so this is our skill, this is
Absolutely.
this is our profession. So I think a lot of it comes to worthiness as
Mhm,
well, where people don't feel worthy. But I think you've made the balance really well, because you've got your classes on Zoom, you've got your physical classes where people come and see you in person, and your one-to-ones. You've got your teaching side, as in teaching people to be yoga teachers. But then also, I think you give a lot of great um, quality and quantity of freebies on your Instagram, which I know you've said are going to be on your YouTube channel as well soon, of your short little 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute videos, reels on Instagram that are make people stop, make people do little bits of meditation, make people do little bits of like hip balancing. And I think that's I think you've hit it right. I think you've got that really good balance. And I think you've just been rewarded with that, haven't you, back in February with your video. So you did a video. Now, I found out about you through my niece. My niece has the podcast Attract, and you went on there with her,
mhm,
didn't you? And we were discussing you the other night, because she was telling me this part of how in February you did a reel, only a short reel, very great content, no fancy frills or anything. It was just you talking,
mm,
doing this exercise, and you called it the magic neck movement, didn't you? Or magic neck exercise, and it went viral. So now currently, I had a look yesterday, and it's currently got 6.8 million views, which is fantastic. Tell me about that. How did that affect? So you just put the video up, doing
Mhm.
your karma yoga, being of service, and then all of a sudden your phone must have started ping, ping, ping as all this is happening. So tell us the story. How did it go?
So I had put So I've been posting online for oh god, I've had an Instagram for years, and I'd kind of written my Instagram off because I'd thought, well, Instagram is a place where I can nurture my clients, but it's not a place where I'm going to get new clients because I never felt like I was getting the reach on Instagram, and that was fine. But so I was just posting. I've always just posted for the community that I've got in there. Um, who are usually just people who've come to my studio or have done my Zoom classes. And I'd put a meditation advent calendar on, and then that had got me into the flow of just putting more things on. And I posted a reel before the next stretch one, and that started getting quite a bit of likes. It got like 6,000 likes, and I got about 3,000 followers from it. And I was like, oh, that's really, I don't know what's happened. I've gone viral. That's amazing. And then I posted the next stretch one, and nothing happened for about a week. And then suddenly it just started to pick up and pick up. And then it went completely insane. And there was a day that I got 30,000 followers on in one day. So it was literally where I was refreshing. And at that time, isn't it funny how your body just knows what's going on? Because I was really ill. So I came down with a virus, and so I wasn't even able to. I mean, if that had happened and I'd been fine, I would have just gone for a walk, or I would have turned my phone off, or I would have just gone into the real world. But I was literally lying in bed, so ill I couldn't even get and go onto the sofa. And I was just refreshing my page, and it was going, and I felt so exposed because I had never had these eyes on us before. I was and the audience that I'd had previously were um people who knew me in real life, so could give me grace. I knew that they came to my things knowing who I was, knowing that I had good intentions, and would always take everything I said with a pinch of salt. Whereas when suddenly you see that these new people who don't know us, and you know what the internet's like, I mean, one wrong thing and you say the wrong word at the wrong time, and there is no level of grace given or benefit of the doubt given. So I didn't know what was going to happen, but luckily everybody's been absolutely lovely. So now that it has calmed down, I'm really enjoying it now that it's calmed down, because it has brought in so many people into my community that are very like the people that I had in my community before, but just and I'm lucky as well that the one that went viral was in keeping with the other stuff that I post. So it wasn't like, I did a completely random thing that wasn't related to anything else I did. So it kind of connected to everything else that I've been posting. So I didn't feel like, oh, I have to change the way that I post or the way that I interact with the people on there. And it's been, yeah, but it has, I don't think I will be able, I've processed it for about 6 months. Ask me in 6 months and I'll tell you what, it was like, because it just was it was 50% super exciting and 50% terrifying. Like there was a point where I was like, I'm going to private my account because I can't deal with this. But I'm so glad I didn't, because now I'm on the other side of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, that was good. That was fun. And I think it's because it just happened. There was no build up to it as well. So it wasn't like I got like a couple of followers and then some more followers. It was literally just in 2 days, it just went loads, and then and it's still going, but it is definitely tailing off now, which I'm very pleased about.
What would you say the fear was?
of being seen,
Mm.
the fear of being seen, definitely the fear of and my I'm really happy in my life. Like I love my life the way it is, and I've kind of always identified as someone who is small, but not in a bad way, but just someone who's happy with a normal small life. And suddenly having this big platform meant that I was having to look at what did I want, um, changing the way that I saw myself. I was having to look at my mindset around um, bigger platforms because I'd always been like, you don't need a big platform. It's just vanity, it's just ego. And then suddenly I had a big platform and I was like, oh, am I one of these egotistical, vain people now that I've got? Like I was suddenly confronted with stuff that I hadn't even, stories that I hadn't even known I'd been telling myself about things and about the way the world worked. And suddenly I had to confront those things. And it was it was ego. It was all ego. It was it was an ego shift. Um, and usually ego shifts happen, well, actually they don't. Ideally, an ego shift would happen over time where you can test the boundary, whereas this was just the universe just ripped.
Trial
But
by
that is
fire. Oof.
well that but that is usually how ego, I was going to say usually it happens slowly, but actually ego um tests happen quickly, don't they? They're big. And um, but it was all mindset. And yeah, very, very strange.
I can totally relate because I had the same with doing this podcast. So I self-fund this podcast. I do it because I love talking to people like you. I love the world we live in, our, I don't like using the word spiritual so much in it, but just people's different views, people's different styles of yoga, people's different ways of healing modalities, whatever it is. I just love talking to people about it. And I have a shop which I stand and talk to people about it all day. So I'm really blessed. So this was I was sort of like guided to do this, and I started doing it with people I knew, people around me who I knew, just to see what it was like, how it would be, got the equipment and stuff. And then as soon as I started getting bigger names, then like you, the fear came in, the fear of being seen, and it is quite, it really is all ego, but
Mhm.
it really is quite it really sort of takes the chair from under you, and
Mhm.
you back down on the floor, aren't you? Because you're just like, woof. It was so intense. The feelings of it were so intense. I mean, a couple of the podcasts with the bigger people, I wouldn't have slept the night before. I was dry mouthed before I started. I was going to the loo all the time. It was pure fear, pure anxiety. But then once I was just like, come on now, just let's have a talk. And you just sort of like talk
Yeah,
yourself out of it, and realize that, "Oh, I see you, ego now." It's just, it sort of
yeah,
like comes in the back door, doesn't it? You sat in this presence, you think,
yeah.
you snuck in the back door and you haven't noticed that it's been there the show, have you? But yeah, so I can totally relate.
You've got to be. I found as well that I know myself, and I've done enough work on myself to know that I am a self sabotager.
Oh
So
yeah.
the minute that my ego feels threatened, it will self sabotage myself. So it'll say, get back down to where you belong. And it's, I've had to really take space. Like I can imagine um, if I had been in your situation with the podcast, I would then not want to promote the ones with the bigger people because you're like, oh no, I don't want to. I don't want people to see that. And if it had failed, you'd almost be slightly glad because
Yeah.
you'd be like, oh well, no one saw that. I can just carry on.
It was
And
like, yeah, because I got to the point after one of the series, I think it was after season two, and I was just like, oh, I'm just going to end it. I don't have to do this anyway. Why am I doing, the self-sabotage? What
Mhm,
do you need to do this for? You've got a lovely life. Why bother?
mhm.
And as soon as I hear that, then I know, then I think, no, no, come on, we're pushing through. And and I did. But yeah, the self-saboteur is incredible. And even like you, even though all the work we've done on ourselves, it's that awareness, isn't it? That
Mhm.
presence of knowing where it is
And
or
it's
how it's appearing.
and it's about giving yourself space for it. I think like 5, 10 years ago, I would have immediately been like, okay, I need to make a YouTube channel now. I need to, and when people were asking, so with this has come a lot of people asking for different things. So people said, oh, can you do this video? Can you do this video? Can you do this video? And I think a couple of years ago, I would have just done everything that anyone was asking. And I would have just gone, I would have burnt out. But now I have the level of awareness to say, no, you don't, like, it's responding, not reacting, which is what yoga is, isn't it? That's the crux
Yeah.
of everything that we do, is just learning to respond and not react. Um, but ego, is we think of, when the word ego comes out, people are quick to think that it's a small thing, or it's a trivial thing, or it's a something that should be, but our ego is there to protect us.
Mhm.
And it's a huge part of our lives. And be having the self-awareness to acknowledge, like, we don't need to get rid of our egos, we just need to be able to have a conversation with them and understand what's going on. um and seeing that as a thanking them for protect they're there to protect us. But I think there is a narrative in the spiritual world and in the online world about staying small, about having these little small lives. That is beautiful, and like, there is great beauty in that. But I think sometimes we can internalize that as, if we want to step out of that, then we're in some way, if we want more, or if we have ambitions, then we're somehow morally, it's more moral to stay small.
Mm.
um and I think it's tall poppy syndrome. You worry that if you dare to say you have a dream, or you dare to say that, other people in the world will say, well, who does she think she is?
Yeah.
And you've got to be careful. That I've noticed that, you in with me, I see the world how I see the world. So now, when I feel myself thinking that about other people, I'm like, that's how, if you put that out into the world, that's how people, if you want people to give you grace, you have to give other people grace as well. And when I look back on the way that I've thought about people in the past, I'm like, that's why I'm so scared.
Mhm.
I'm scared because that's the way I used to think about people. And the way to get over it is to give grace to others. And that's how you get grace. You believe that there's grace in the world. I don't know if that made sense, but
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it is because it's that judgment, isn't it?
Mhm.
It is a very judgmental world, or it can be a judgmental world. And I think there's some amazing parts of social media, but there are some negative parts of social media. And I think a lot of it is the pressure to
Mhm.
look a certain way, behave a certain way, be a certain way. So a yoga teacher fits into this square. This is how you are. And I think that you have pushed out of that, as have a lot stay in it, a lot push out. And I think that's where success comes from, when we push ourselves out of the box and stand up to be that tallest poppy, even though inside we might be quaking at our boots and that, "Oh," you just have to trust and
Yeah.
go with it and allow the process.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because I find this so much easier. So it's almost like I got to the point where not letting myself be myself was harder than just letting, and the minute that I was like, oh, I'm just going to be myself, that was when people started to respond. Because I get comments a lot where people say, I love the way that you're not, and I don't actually, they say, oh, you're not like the other images that I'm seeing on social media. And I think, well, I could, that's because I can't do that. Like, I literally, like, I tried to do that and I couldn't do that. So I did, I was me. And so lovely that that's actually, because people say that, but until you've experienced it, you're like, actually, no, honing in on who you are is the way to be successful, because people respond. Because I think people can tell the authenticity. I think people can smell it.
I think so. And exactly that. You are your business. So
Mhm.
you're like on your videos, you come across as it's like, hi, it's like your neighbor knock on the door. Hi, I've just called in for a coffee. And it's that friendly that people, there's no pressure to your
Mhm.
videos. They're informative, and there's normally an action in them. Try this, do this, but there's not that you must, there's not a force, and there's not a forcing people into being something they don't want to be.
Yeah.
You do it in a very gentle, why don't you try this? Like
Mhm.
I loved the one the other day when you were doing the counting with the
Ugh.
breath, and I'm a big fan of the box breath. And I was like, oh, I've never even thought about that. Crazy when I know all the mudras, but I'd never thought about tying the two together. And it just takes it to another level.
I think people can do things in really, like, I really believe that small things often the most effective way. And I think that a lot of people have this idea. One of the barriers that people have to do in yoga is they tell themselves they don't have time, and they tell themselves they don't have the space, and they tell themselves, and they put all these barriers up. And so I was like, what can I do to take that barrier off completely and say, well, let's just do it now. Let's just do it right this second. We'll do a minute of yoga, and then you can get on with whatever you were doing before. Because I think that, because that's how my yoga practice is. I know that if I have to go and put on my special yoga clothes, and I have to go and get out my special yoga mat, and I have to go and, the more barriers there are in place, the less likely I am to do it. Whereas, and it's that thing, isn't it? It's like cleaning your house. The more you do it, the more you do it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. So
if you haven't done it for a week, then getting the Hoover out feels like a big thing. But if you do little bits often, then it's not a big thing at all, because it's just something that you do. Um, and so when I was trying to think of things to do online, I was like, well, why don't I just, instead of explaining things, why don't I just get people to just, let's just do it now? Um, and I think, and it's worked, which I can't believe that people are doing it. That one that I posted, um, I got something like 300 comments of people saying that they'd done it. And it was such a lovely feeling to think, oh, people are, because sometimes you do things on social media, don't you? And you're like, oh, well, no one's ever going to see that or do that. And then when people are saying, oh, I've done that. And you must get this with your podcasts where people say, and I really love that. And you're like, are you listening?
yeah, I do. When people come in the shop or they message me, people always message me through the shop, not through the podcast Instagram, which is very low anyway. That's probably why. But yeah, and like I've had a lovely a lady today from your neck of the woods message me, and she's like, I've just found your podcast, and I'm like, oh, and you do for that moment, you're like, oh, but then she's, I'm really enjoying it. I didn't know you did it, and yeah, exactly that. So you just, people. I had a lovely email last week, a lady saying that I don't know her, that she'd found the podcast and what a difference it has made to her life, and I'm like, wow. And it's not me, just me, it's the guests
No,
as well, obviously, but it's the topics that I enjoy.
but
But
I think when you make these things, you're doing it on your own, aren't you? Well, you're doing it with a guest, but you kind of do it in this very, like, isolated thing. And it's not like,
yeah.
in your shop, someone comes in and that you have that, and it's the same in my studio. Someone comes in, I feel like I've had that exchange. We've had the energy exchange. It's beautiful, and but it feels very real. But whereas with stuff that you do online, you're doing it, and then you kind of, you have this idea that there's an audience, but also it doesn't feel real. And then when somebody says, and you're like, oh, you listen to that. And it's such a lovely feeling. But it's all, I feel like I sometimes have to keep that distance. Otherwise, I wouldn't. If I start thinking about the audience too much, I start changing what I'm doing, or I just get a little bit. I get freaked out, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I get freaked out.
No, yeah, it's overwhelming, but yeah, it's quite funny because I've got a sleeping, snoring dog down here. I'm in our office, so this we do so it looks nice. There's all like the files and everything over here, and ring light you have to have, and so yeah, it is funny that it's just to me, it's just me and you having a natter.
Mhm.
So then when people are seeing it and telling you that they're listening to it or they're watching it, then yeah, it does like, oh.
And obviously that's why you do it. But it is, yeah, it's such a strange thing. Um, how long have you been doing the podcast?
Over 2 years now. Just
Oh, lovely,
is it coming up 2 years, I think? Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah, I do, and I've had some amazing people on, but for me, I like, I'll see somebody, I'll invite them on, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to talk to them because I want to ask them about this, and I wonder how they did that, and I wonder, so hopefully that comes across then in the podcast. But yeah, for me, it's just like having a virtual coffee with
Mm.
somebody. That's how I got over my nerves, by just saying to myself, it's just you and them. You just sat having a natter.
Think so. I teach because obviously I teach yoga teachers, and I think the best yoga teachers are the people who are really interested in people, and you can't fake that. And like, because you say you've got a shop and you were a yoga teacher, so you are obviously a people person, and you can't fake. Um, in myself, I'm like, because one of the pieces of feedback I quite often get as a yoga teacher is people say, "Oh, you're so good at remembering people's names, and you're so good at remembering people's like things about people." And I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm really nosy."
Yeah, same. I normally
But
start that off with and say, "Well, I'm nosy. Tell me your backstory." Yeah,
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 it's like
exactly
I'm
that.
really nosy, so that's why I remember, because and I think in a world where there's people are so isolated, it's nice for people to feel that people are interested in them. So if you're naturally interested in people, it does make this kind of work a lot easier, because it's, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think there's a lot of a lot of healing work and a lot of spiritual work and a lot of yoga is about attention and about giving people attention, and if you are interested, that's half the battle, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's listening to people. People aren't heard, are
Mhm,
they? And generally out and about, a lot of people are never heard. So just to give somebody that time to sit and listen to them, sometimes that's all the healing that they need, just to be
mhm,
able to say what's on the mind, share what's on the mind, feel like it's a weight lifted. So
mhm.
yeah, I agree with that. It is a massive thing just to give somebody time.
And when people say, "Well, do I need to be bendy? Do I need to be able to stand on my head to be a yoga teacher?" And you're like, "No, you just need to be like, you need to be you, because the people who the people there will be people who are at your level that will respond to what what you are saying now." I always say to my teachers that the thing that they think is the barrier for them to be a yoga teacher is the thing that's going to make them a great yoga teacher. So
Yeah.
if they think that they're too old to be a yoga teacher, that's the thing that they need to lead with.
Mhm.
If they think that they're too shy to be a yoga teacher, if they think that they're too um, academic to be a yoga teacher, or they think that they don't get their left and rights muddled up. The struggle that they have is the thing that's gonna, because other people with that struggle will be attracted to
Yes,
them as well.
it's your vibe attracts your tribe, and
Yeah,
you, your greatest weakness, as you think, actually
hmm,
becomes your greatest strength. Yeah, I
it
totally.
totally does.
Mm,
Yeah,
it totally does. Well, I think I could talk to you all day, but I think that's a perfect way to end because I know you've got to shoot off for a class. So
I know it's a shame.
thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed our chat. I really have.
Yeah,
And I will put all Joe's details in the show notes below. Please go on her Instagram. Honestly, I've become a bit obsessed, and there's all sorts. And I love that it just pops up on your feed, and you think, "Oh, there's Joe. I'll just do it." You just do a little bit of. I do a minute yoga behind the counter, and then I'm. But so if you come in the shop and I'm doing, you think, "What's she doing?" I'm doing Joe's yoga. So there you go. So thank you for joining me, and
thank
guys,
you.
I'll be back again soon with another great guest. Thank you. Bye.